The toughest thing about recording a podcast is just how you enter. So I'm going to try something new. All right, hear this out, Brian.
And listen,
It's the season long podcast, Occupy Fantasy. How does that sound?
yo, you killed it. That was it. That was it. We don't need to
All
ever
right,
record an intro ever again.
Occupy Fam, you're going to get that from here on out. As always, it's Walid. I'm here with Brian. Not as always. I take some days off.
Yeah, we give, like I said, we have a very generous benefits package here at Occupy Fantasy, and Walid uses his PTO very thoroughly.
You got to, man. You got to. Like, other than that, then the man's running your life. So you got to stick it to the man every once in a while. But, Brian, let's jump into it. Season long. There's a lot going on and very little time to discuss it. So, top free agents to pick up this week. Waiver wires that process Thursday morning. What are you doing?
Brian Hill's got to be the first guy you look at, right? I know many leagues' deadlines have passed, but maybe Wednesday night you have waivers. But Devonta Freeman's out 2 weeks. Ito Smith is on IR. They face the worst rush defense in Carolina this week. Hill has no competition. But Walid, I think also this could be a long-term play too. I don't think it's out of the question that, with the Falcons being where their season is, that they shut down Freeman completely.
Right. I mean, despite that big win against the Saints, which no one saw coming, they are a 2-7 team, and I'm sure some folks in the locker room, the Sam Darnolds of the world, believe that they can make the playoffs. But most front office folks, especially, anyone on the coaching staff, should know that this is a sunk cost. So let's let Brian Hill play, right? Even when Freeman recovers.
Yeah, I mean, they already messed up by not taking the Lions' offer for Freeman when they offered it right before the trade deadline. I mean, they
What was that? What did they offer?
The Lions were trying to get Freeman before the deadline when Carry-On went down, and they got him for a draft pick, and the Falcons could very easily cut Freeman next year anyways with little to no cost. So I'm surprised they didn't do that. Again, that's maybe an overly optimistic front office thinking that they can still make the playoffs this year.
Perhaps they thought it was a keeper dynasty league, and I mean, running backs have a lot of value in fantasy football.
It's a common mistake. Yeah, they probably did that.
But no, to your point, Brian Hill is definitely the hot name on the waiver wire. I tried to get him last night, no success. He was sold for $51, and unless you've been hoarding your free agent auction budget, it will be tough to get. But we're in crunch time now. Chances are, if you're still in the mix, you need to win, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're a game behind the playoff spot or you're holding on to it, you're not going to get running backs that are going to slot into opportunities like this often. And we say unload the clip, right? Is that fair?
I think you have to. I mean, even if it's just 2 weeks of a running back, like the games are too important at this point. Everyone is fighting for playoff spots in your fantasy league. Like you can, there might not be any difference makers on the waiver wire from here on out. So I think you have to take the chances while you get them.
And speaking of the Detroit Lions, there's a reason why they were looking at Devonta Freeman. It's because their starting running back right now is J.D. McKissack, who actually had quite the workload last week.
Yeah, once Ty Johnson, shout out Maryland, went down with a concussion early in the game, McKissack played like 58 snaps and had 17 targets and rushing attempts, and Ty Johnson wasn't practicing as of this recording Wednesday, so they could very easily go into this game with just Paul Perkins and J.D. McKissack, and they feel comfortable giving him the rock. So was that your consolation prize when you tried to get Brian Hill in your league?
Yeah, I mean, totally. The opportunity is there, right? And that's like half the battle when it comes to digging deep in the waiver wire for a running back. And it's too good to pass up on, and a good consolation because, maybe someone else already had him, given he's still, like, he didn't just come out of nowhere, right? We knew him and Ty Johnson were the two guys out Detroit, but anyone that's looking for a running back is gunning for Brian Hill, and you might be able to get a good consolation prize in J.D. McKissack.
That's definitely true, at least as a 1 week opportunity, perhaps. Any other running backs you think that are out there that you were looking at in your leagues?
Sheesh.
It's thin, I know. Yeah.
It's thin, man. At this point, like, anyone that you'll find is going to be there anyway after waivers clear. And,
True.
And I'm in the scenario right now where I have Chris Carson on a bye and have some beat up running backs. So it gets ugly, man. At this point, like, Darius Geis, he's already been, no one's waiting on him.
Kareem Hunt was scooped up, so
Kareem Hunt was already, gone. Folks had the foresight, and some people even held on to him. So, who's available outside these two guys?
right.
You got to go real deep.
What I would say is, assuming these guys are still out there, and maybe you're fortunate enough to have a free spot in your roster, whether through you put a guy on injured reserve or whatever it may be, but grab those high value backup running backs, Alexander Mattison, Tony Pollard, those types of guys who, God forbid, something happens to the starter this weekend, you have a legit running back one.
And one guy I can kind of throw out here is Raheem Mostert.
Oh, yeah, true, yeah.
He was, quote-unquote, the goal line back, right, like week 3. But, we saw him get 6 carries last week, and, hey, favorable game script potentially against the Cardinals.
Yeah, and Breida's out a week or two. I know he's Wolverine, and he'll probably still play, but they say he's out. And if that's the case, they're committed to a running back by committee. So he's going to get carries against a pretty poor rush defense. I guess there are worse options.
Give me the most desperate option you can think of that can still convert double-digit fantasy points. I'm talking about like the Darrell Williams of the world. I'm talking about the Malcolm Browns and the Jalen Richards. Like, if you are so depleted and you just need to start someone, waivers cleared, and you're like, what do I do? Help me out.
Oh man, that's tough.
We'll say half-point PPR just to kind of keep it balanced.
Yeah. Man. Paul Perkins, I think. There's no saying that McKissack's going to get the entire workload there if Ty Johnson misses. I honestly think you could start Alexander Mattison this week because Minnesota is a 10-point home favorite. There's a very good opportunity for him in that fourth quarter. In games where they're leading, he gets like 50% of the touches in the fourth quarter out of that backfield. So I think he's a sneaky play for a potential 10-point outing.
And I know. We talked about Tampa Bay backfield way too much.
I was going to say it, bro. I was going to say Barber, but I figured you'd bring it up anyway, so.
11 carries for 43 yards, matching. I think Ronald Jones had 11 carries himself. So much for him being the guy. And Barber did score a touchdown too.
That's true. Ronald Jones did most of his damage through the air, which you know what? He actually tied his high school career receptions total in that game last weekend. All through high school and college, he never caught passes, and he randomly caught 8 last week. So.
8 of 8 for 77 yards, and that is more of what we expected from him when he was drafted. But yeah, like when you're this desperate, sometimes you just need to find a guy who can get you that 1-yard touchdown. And Peyton Barber, at that point, yeah, you're rolling the dice, but there are guys out there like him that can get you that double-digit fantasy outing when waivers clear.
Yeah, if you're digging that deep, you're just, at least someone who could potentially get goal line carries is what you're looking for.
So fantasy aside, I was having a funny conversation with my boy Scott earlier today, and I was like, man, Josh Gordon made 2 huge catches in the context of the football game when he stepped in. And he was like, he only had 2 catches, but you're right, they were huge. So Tyler Lockett's leg injury, it's the news at first sounded scary, like holy shit, this guy might lose his leg because of some muscle and nerve injury. Tell me about it.
Yeah, compartment syndrome. It's I've only heard about it when it involves the lower leg. Not that I'm a medical expert by any means, but it sounds scary. It's basically pressure built up in the leg, and it's scary in the context is if you don't get it treated right away. But he's an NFL player. He went to the hospital immediately. They kept him overnight for observation. Like, they took care of it. They relieved the pressure. He's good to go. So assuming there's no complications, he should be back after their bye week. But if you're trying to trade for Tyler Lockett in your league, definitely send your league mates some WebMD articles about the dangers of compartment syndrome.
Totally. But what about Josh Gordon? If you're looking at someone who can give you some week 14, 15, 16 production, do you see him ascending in his role in this offense? Or do you think between, the conservative, let's say, offensive scheme of Schottenheimer down to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett's role, there just isn't enough volume to make Gordon interesting.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough volume. I would mostly pick him up just with the hopes that maybe he does end up starting at some point, whether it's through Lockett's injury or some other injury. But as the third receiver in this offense, I think it'll be tough.
James Washington, 17 targets in the last 3 games. We talked about Mason Rudolph and his relationship, chemistry that they had going into this year, but he fell off. I mean, he had a great preseason, but
Always.
And now we're getting to that point of the year where, hey, the Steelers are finding ways to stay relevant and win games. And is he due for like a blow-up spot?
Yeah, he turned it into 90 yards. I think that was a career high last week and scored the touchdown. And it's kind of crazy because Deontay Johnson and James Washington are the number ones now. Now, maybe that had a lot to do with Jalen Ramsey shadowing Juju last week. So we'll see how it translates this week, this Thursday night they play. But I don't know. I mean, he's a high upside guy, and they're kind of sharing this wide receiver one role in Pittsburgh. Again, I'm not sure the ceiling is that high every week. Now that I think about it, this probably was a 1 week aberration.
Yeah, I mean, you do like the targets, right? That's always a big thing, especially with a receiver who you think is the third guy in the mix. Are the targets there? Is the opportunity there? But he does have big playability, and once again, if you're looking for a desperate flex play, I don't see the harm in targeting a guy who's getting those targets, but also has that upside to catch a 60-yard touchdown.
Yeah, I agree with that. Again, if you're struggling with bye weeks, I mean, there's certainly worse options.
Moving on, Deebo Samuel. He is stepping in a role as the number one receiver at this point. I mean, we knew the hype going into preseason, and now Emmanuel Sanders came to San Fran, so we thought his role was going to diminish, but Deebo is looking like the guy.
Yeah, run after the catchability, making some contested catches, getting some carries. He's doing it all, and you can't ask for a better matchup this week against Arizona. It should be moved around the formation, and like I said, get chances behind the line of scrimmage. So we'll see how Emmanuel Sanders' rib progresses. There's still a chance he might play on Sunday, but at worst,
I have a feeling he is, man.
He should. And according to the guys on Twitter that I somehow ran into, said that you can't be sitting out with these types of injuries in this late in the season. And I'm sure those guys on Twitter know exactly what it means to be tough and playing football games. So.
Oh, for sure. But no, Deebo has been impressive, and I mean, Kyle Shanahan earlier in the year, we were kind of talking about, like, what is he doing with Dante Pettis? Like, is he really testing him? Is he, like, kind of challenging him to step up? And it looks like Deebo has taken his role. And at this point, I mean, when you get a guy who's averaging 9 targets through the last 2 weeks, like, you got to take note, and he's converted on those opportunities. So with one of the best matchups you can ask for, he's also, regardless of what happens in my eyes with Emmanuel Sanders, you can justify starting Deebo this week.
That's a good point. Yeah, I agree with that. And I would start him over Washington for sure.
So Darius Slayton, what are your thoughts? I know that when he scored 2 touchdowns in a span of the first how many minutes of the game?
It was quick.
Everyone was tilting, but I mean, he's slowly but surely making a name for himself.
Yeah, man, he looks the part. I guess the only thing here is, one, does it feel like point chasing? Like you're grabbing the guy who just scored 2 touchdowns. And, Sterling Shepard should be back soon or some point. But I don't know. If you're in the Giants spot, and not saying they're a smart organization, but, you have nothing to play for at this point, why not let your young receiver continue to develop chemistry with your young quarterback?
Totally. And I mean, at this point, they're entering their bye week, right? So, if he's on a roster, I doubt that owner is going to cut him, given just the bias that comes with having a guy like that. Oh, he just scored 2 touchdowns. Yeah. But if he's sitting there, and I mean, you got matchups against the Bears, the Packers, the Eagles, the Dolphins, and the Redskins.
Pretty nice slate.
Some opportunities to be taken advantage of.
Yeah, I think so. And another guy who's actually taking advantage of opportunities, I think he's taking advantage or is getting the opportunities. Andy Isabella, he finally ran some more routes last week, 18, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's his most this season.
Yeah.
And he's been converting. I think he had 70 some yards on 3 catches. So gotta hope that, we talked about him a couple weeks now. Hopefully he stayed under the radar long enough, but they got to get this guy involved more, and it seems like they're doing that.
Right. And I think at this point, it's safe to say Arizona's offense, it took like 9, 10 weeks into the season, but now they're finally opening up to some of the upside that we were expecting maybe earlier, and maybe we were being a little too optimistic. But Christian Kirk, we see him have that blow up game, and I mean, Larry Fitz, like it comes down to where you think Larry Fitzgerald's role is going to continue, and it's hard for me to see him as turning into some big play guy. So there's plenty of opportunity for Andy Isabella, and he looks to be like that number 3 guy for them.
And it's not like they haven't been running out scrubs like Demir Bird and Pharaoh Cooper and
Pharaoh,
all these other guys. So, like, I mean,
hey, Pharaoh, it was him that called you a scrub, not me.
Yeah, God forbid he listened to this podcast. Sorry, Pharaoh.
No, but I mean, definitely someone worth kind of stashing, especially when you look at the Cardinals, who, I mean, they're playing for the future, right? And they're going to want to see what they have out of this guy. He defines someone that week 13, week 14, he might have more opportunities and could make a difference in the playoffs.
You got that right. And are there any other receivers you want to talk about real quick? Because I want to get to this tight end situation.
Let's jump to tight ends because I think we've exhausted all the receivers.
All right, because I've had quite a few people offline ask me about this. I know tons of people out there are in this situation. Austin Hooper has been the number 1 tight end through 10 weeks. He's probably a big reason where a lot of his owners are in fantasy leagues. And now they announced today that he's out a month. They didn't really give any details beyond that. He has the MCL sprain. Assuming he's out 4 weeks, Lead, what do Hooper owners do? What can they do?
No, cry me a river. Oh, I got this guy in the last round of the draft because I believed in him so much, and he's pretty much just given me a good fantasy game every opportunity he's played, including the game he got hurt. He still scored. So,
all right, well.
You cry me a river. You figure it out. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, some folks spent money on Travis Kelce and invested high draft capital on, O.J. Howard, who we'll talk about in a second. Or God forbid, you got Evan Ingram, who's just finding a way to get hurt. So I don't know, man. You figure it out. Do you want me to have sympathy for these guys?
I don't know, man. I thought that's what people were tuning in for some sympathy. But we'll have to play good cop, bad cop here because clearly you're not feeling sorry for these folks. So I'll lay out some suggestions, and maybe if you're feeling nice, you can jump in. I guess what you have to do if you have Hooper, for those of you who are in this situation,
first cry. You are the victim in this situation.
Complain about it on Twitter for sure. Mm-hmm. Do Instagram Live if you have to. So there aren't many options on the waiver wire. You could pick up O.J. Howard this week, maybe if he's out there. Jared Cook, who seems to be the popular choice for most people in this situation. Noah Fant. I am a little more risky.
Your boy.
Noah Fant is my boy. But I'm a little risky. I would probably pick up Ross Dwelly this week. Kittle's backup. They're playing Arizona, worst tight end defense in the history of the world. And then figure it out after this week, because it's not like these guys we named above aren't going to be, scooped up and held on to. So I would go Dwelly 1 week and then just try to make it work thereafter.
I'm a fan of that. I mean, 7 targets last week. Kerry Kittle's his biggest fan as he continues to root for him in the owner's suite.
Yeah.
But, I mean, why not bet on a Kyle Shanahan tight end who's getting the volume and has a friendly matchup? So, after that, you're just going to have to figure it out. You're just going to have to figure it out, whether it means, hoping that Tyler Eifert can come in big for you or guys that are, at that point, I mean, you're digging deep and just praying for a touchdown, but they're out there, and welcome to reality, Austin Hooper owners.
All right, one more.
I don't know what you want me to say. I mean, Don't get me started, man. Don't get me started.
Walid is very, very bitter about Austin Hooper for whatever reason.
Look, because first of all, I'm a big fan of his, right?
Yeah.
And you get to this point where it's in fantasy. There's elements season-long fantasy where there is dumb luck, and I'm willing to bet. And correct me if I'm wrong. Please at Twitter hit me up because chances are you got Austin Hooper, and when you drafted him, you're like, whatever, I'm just going to start him week 1. And all of a sudden, once he started going off, you probably were like, I told you about Austin Hooper. I try to tell you he's due for a big year, right?
True.
That's where we're at, and you just got to figure it out.
One final
but OJ,
go ahead.
Final thought. Let's hear it. Go ahead.
I have one final good cop thought, and his backup, Jaden Graham. We played him pretty much every week of the preseason the last 2 years. Decent receiving tight end. He had a long of 30 yards. He had a 30-yard catch in preseason, 12 catches, 127 yards in preseason, which is tough to do as a tight end. If you're absolutely stuck, I would pick him up.
Jimmy Graham, right?
Oh God, yeah, Jimmy Graham. Yeah, he's this guy is somehow more athletic than Jimmy Graham at this stage of his career.
It's bad when you look at 2 tight ends, and one of them is priced $3,000 on DraftKings, and the other is priced $2,800. So roll the dice, man. That's why tight ends exist in fantasy. Hopefully they catch a touch, and you're a genius.
There you go. The wise words from Walid.
But OJ Howard, we talked about him a couple seconds ago. He looked promising. Did all of a sudden Bruce Arians start believing in the tight end position?
When I first saw it and I was watching the game and checking just box scores, scouting, I said, well, I guess it must be the Arizona matchup. But then you look back, he played like every snap. He ran a route on most of Winston's dropbacks. So maybe they are actually getting him more involved. We'll see.
And, I mean, he could very well be sitting on the waiver wire. And for what it's worth, I would take my chances on him probably over any other guy we mentioned. So
agree.
Maybe I'll get burned on that. But the talent's there, and slowly but surely the opportunity looks like it's improving to what it should be. He got 7 targets last week, and even if he gets 4 or 5 targets, I'll take that.
Right. Just think back. If before the season started I said OJ Howard is healthy and on your waiver wire, you'd probably pick him up in week 11. So
there you go. So Survivor pick time. For those of you that are still in it, damn, you're pretty good at this by now. So what do you do?
Zero chance I'm taking the 49ers at minus 11.5 versus the Cardinals. Give me the Vikings versus the Broncos. I don't know if I can trust the Raiders versus anyone, even if it is Cincinnati. I think Minnesota is my pick. What do you think?
Oh man, I hate saying it, but as the Thursday night game wrapped up last week and the Raiders beat the Chargers, I'm like, oh, look ahead at their schedule. Perfect. It's a great opportunity for them to lose 2 straight games now, right? But here we are, and I mean, they got the long week. They're going against Ryan Finley. They're at home. I mean, surely they got this one in the bag.
I don't know, man. Finley looked bad, but Finley's actually pretty good. I mean, Baltimore's defense is going to make any rookie quarterback look bad. Man, this John Gruden team's got to lay 10.5 points. I don't trust it, man. I do not trust it.
Yeah, no, I mean, point taken. But aside from this, like, this is a funny thing to talk about non-fantasy wise, but who would you rather have, Jimmy Garoppolo or Derek Carr? Because that's who we're talking about for Survivor at home. Both of these guys, friendly matchups. Who are you taking?
From a Survivor picks perspective, from a GM's perspective, or from an owner's perspective?
From the perspective of you're simple-minded and you're going to base your Survivor pick over which quarterback you trust more. So I'm really not trying to dig deeper into this outside of who do you trust more, like Skip Bayless, Stephen A. Smith. We're talking hot takes like Jimmy G or Derek Carr at home, big game. Who are you taking?
Jimmy G's won the most starts since whatever since his first 16. So he's 14-2. So he's a winner. You got to go with him. Plus he's handsome.
100%.
So
Sold. There you go. Sold. Right. Derek Carr looks okay too, man. Come on. Um, Streaming a QB this week, Derek Carr versus the Bengals. I know I'm doing that, but any other suggestions?
I like him as my top option if he's available. Kyle Allen with the other one against the Falcons defense. Falcons crazy game last week. No pressure on the quarterback all year. Then all of a sudden sacked Breeze like 6 times. I'm not betting on a repeat. I'm going to Kyle Allen, and we'll definitely talk about that game in our DFS podcast as a game to stack.
Oh yeah, and he was impressive last week, despite his inability to hit Curtis Samuel on the money. I mean, that's a tough game in those conditions in Lambeau Field. I was impressed. So I think you can do a lot worse than that. And streaming defenses, we got a few to consider.
Yeah, Vikings if they're available, obviously double-digit home favorites. The Rams against Mitchell Trubisky. Raiders against the Bengals, newfound pressure by their defensive line. But then what I want to get your opinion on, Walid, Jets or Redskins, both defenses are likely available in that matchup. Do you have a preference to either side?
It's tough because the Jets seem to just be really funneled towards this passing game, and they get lit up through the air. The Skins just it's a perfect storm for Haskins and Scary Terry to go off. Now, for that reason, I'm going, and hey, the bye week, right? Does that matter at all?
No. I don't think so. Not at this point, no. Nope. Nope. I don't think so.
And you know how much I hate picking the Skins, so I would rather have the Skins defense against the Jets.
Fair. I'll go with them too.
And some of the questions our beloved followers shot at us. Let's run through them in a alternating fashion.
Let's do it.
PPR, Sony Michel or Kareem Hunt?
That changed quickly, right?
Holy smokes. Kareem Hunt, I mean, the dude came in and he was involved in the passing game. So I can't believe that's a real thing we're talking about. If you asked me this a couple weeks ago,
yeah.
But here we are, man. And I think Kareem Hunt might be the guy.
Dude, I think so too. Yeah, give me Hunt. I'll go Hunt. All right.
Oh, man.
Maybe a question we may have expected. Bench stashes in order for the playoff run. So rank these guys, the guys to stash. AJ Green, Josh Gordon, who we've talked about, Darius Geis, and Mark Walton.
I'm going to go with Darius Geis. Running backs are definitely the toughest thing to kind of pick up this late in the season. AJ Green, we just don't know. He might not even play a snap this year.
Right. Yeah, I don't think he is.
It's very possible. Josh Gordon, I think even if he hits his upside, it's not going to be enough to be a league winner. Like, he might deliver 1 week for you where he gets 6 catches and 100 yards, and then you're going to want to start him, and then next week he gets 1 catch, right?
Yep.
But Darius Geis seems like the guy who he has a path to being a 15 to 20 carry guy for like the latter part of the season. And where are you going to find that?
That's a good point. That's a great point. I think you have to rank him number 1 just based on that fact alone. AP's not going to go away, but Chris Thompson's still dealing with his injury. Callahan wants to run the ball 90 times a game anyway, so carries to go around.
Half-point PPR, 8-team league. Stephon Diggs or OBJ?
Give me Beckham this week. He's due for a blow-up, as you'll find out in our DFS podcast.
And half-point PPR, Austin Eckler or Brian Hill?
Hill this week for sure with that matchup against Carolina. And I let you do 2 in a row because I wanted to ask you the tough question. Chris P, who is he's always asking us questions every week about his team.
Kristaps Porzingis?
Yeah, Kristaps Porzingis, longtime Occupy follower, wants to know.
I'm glad he just makes time for this. Like, it's flattering.
It is flattering. So thank you, Kristaps, for reaching out. So Kristaps is starting Zeke, Aaron Jones, Michael Thomas, Tyreek, and Ertz. So congrats on that. He's flexing either Damian Williams, DK Metcalf, Marvin Jones Jr.
He's flexing his whole team on us.
Yeah, pretty much. So he wants to know, does he trade Michael Thomas for Keenan Allen and either James Conner or Marlon Mack to strengthen his flex spot? And if so, which of those 2 running backs do you prefer the rest of the season, James Conner or Marlon Mack?
Okay, so you have Zeke and Aaron Jones, and you have Michael Thomas. And you're asking if you should trade Michael Thomas for both Keenan Allen and whether it's Mac or Connor
Yep.
to essentially replace Damian Williams, DK, or Marvin Jones
Yep.
rest of the season. At this point, trading Michael Thomas sounds like a crime.
You might be right.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna make a hard pass. You have Zeke, you have Aaron Jones. I mean, Michael Thomas is on pace for 150 catches. So I don't know. I mean, like, I, if I have him it's like, okay, when guys get touchdowns or they get big plays, you're like, all right, regression is due. But what regression is Michael Thomas due for?
That's true.
Like,
I mean, he's getting 15 targets a game. Like, that's not. There's no regression to come. He might get a little less, but again, generally the sides who get the one in the 2-for-1 trades make out much better than the two sides. So I'm agree with you, Walid. I think you stick with MT here.
and then you look at the rest of the Saints teams. It's like the rest of the Saints receiving attack is like, who is going to take his targets?
No one's going to command targets in that offense. So
Traquan Smith is back. Like, he had 2 targets last week.
MT still had 15. So
That's the answer to your question. So, let's keep it going. I'm kind of confused by what's going on. I'm seeing a lot of questions where people are. Help me out, Brian.
I think we're good. I think that was the final question.
I went down to some just responses of people saying, "Yo, Brian, you gave me terrible advice this week."
Yeah, let's cut it off here because we don't need to broadcast that.
All right, that's it for us here. We'll catch you on the flip side with the DFS podcast. As always, you know where to find us at Occupy Fantasy, and we appreciate you guys. Cheers.